Stop talking. Stop reacting. Stop giving your power away every time someone provokes you. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. The moment you stop explaining yourself, defending yourself, or reacting emotionally, everything changes. People lose leverage over you. Conflict collapses. Pressure works in your favor. This audiobook will teach you how emotional silence becomes psychological dominance, how staying calm when others react puts you in total control of every situation. If you are tired of being triggered, misunderstood, or manipulated, listen closely. Because silence is the strongest move you have, and almost no one knows how to use it. Chapter 1: Stop reacting and reclaim your power. Most people believe their reactions define who they are. They say, "That's just how I am." They say, "I can't help it." That's a lie. Emotional reactions are not personality traits. They are habits, and habits can be broken. Every time you react instantly, every raised voice, every defensive explanation, every emotional outburst, you hand your power to someone else. Not accidentally, automatically. That's the rule. Whoever reacts first loses. Read that again. Whoever reacts first loses. You don't lose the argument. You lose control. And control is what this entire audiobook is about. You have a choice. You always have a choice. The moment something triggers you, there is a gap. It's small, almost invisible, but it exists. And inside that gap is your power. Most people fill that gap with emotion, with words, with defense, with noise. That's where they fail. It's not about anger. It's not about sensitivity. It's not about personality. It's about discipline. Let's talk about real life. You're in an argument. Someone raises their voice, accuses you, disrespects you. Your instinct is to jump in immediately, to interrupt, to explain, to correct, to defend your position. That instinct feels natural. It feels justified. It feels necessary. It's none of those things. The louder person isn't the stronger one. They're the one who lost control first. You stay still. You don't rush to speak. You don't rush to explain. Silence enters the room. And suddenly, everything shifts. The other person keeps talking. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They reveal their insecurity, their impatience, their lack of control. You didn't win by speaking. You won by not reacting. Whoever reacts first loses. Now take this into the workplace. A coworker criticizes you in a meeting. A boss challenges you aggressively. Most people panic internally. Their heart rate spikes. Their mouth opens before their mind catches up. They rush to justify their work. They rush to defend their value. They rush to prove they belong. You don't need their permission. The moment you react emotionally, you confirm their dominance in the situation. But when you pause, when you slow down, you reclaim authority. A calm response after silence carries more weight than 10 rushed explanations. That pause says, "I'm not threatened." That pause says, "I'm in control." That's the key. Pause is power. Not silence forever. Silence first. Online confrontation works the same way, maybe even more brutally. Someone comments, insults you, tries to provoke you publicly. Your fingers itch to respond, to correct them, to prove them wrong. You have a choice. Most people choose reaction. They choose ego. They choose noise. And they lose. Silence forces the other person to keep going, to expose their intent, to look emotional while you remain grounded. You stay still. They unravel. That's not avoidance. That's strategy. It's not about cowardice. It's about control. Now let's make this practical. The first rule of emotional silence is simple, but it's uncomfortable. When triggered, do nothing for 5 seconds. Not 1 second. 5. Breathe. Slow your body down. Your nervous system wants to hijack you. That's what emotion does. Pulls you into reaction before thought. Those 5 seconds interrupt the pattern. That's the discipline. You're not suppressing emotion. You're containing it. You're telling yourself, I decide when I respond. Not them. Not the situation. You have a choice. Say it again internally when pressure hits. You have a choice. That reminder alone changes behavior. Next instruction. Stop filling silence. Most people are terrified of silence. They rush to fill it because silence feels like loss of control. In reality, it's the opposite. Silence makes other people talk. Talking makes other people reveal themselves. You're gathering information while they're burning energy. That's the key. When you speak less, your words matter more. When you react less, your presence grows. It's not about being passive. It's about being deliberate. Here's another rule. You don't owe immediate responses. Not in conversations. Not in messages. Not in conflict. Urgency is often a manipulation tactic. People push for fast reactions because they benefit from your lack of composure. You don't need their permission to slow down. You decide the pace. That's power. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you rewire your identity. You stop being someone who is easily moved and start becoming someone who is solid. Stillness becomes your default. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Emotional reactions feel good in the moment because they release tension. But they cost you respect long-term. Discipline feels uncomfortable in the moment. But it builds authority. It's not about comfort. It's about control. You don't need to win every exchange. You need to stop losing your center. Whoever reacts first loses. Burn that into your mind. This chapter is not asking you to be silent all the time. It's asking you to stop being predictable. Predictable reactions make you manageable. Unpredictable calm makes you powerful. From now on, when pressure hits, you pause. When emotions rise, you slow down. When someone tries to pull you into chaos, you stay grounded. That's how power returns to you. You mastered the pause. You reclaimed control from your reactions. Now we go deeper. Because silence doesn't just protect your power, it multiplies it. Chapter 2. Silence is not weakness, it's authority. Most people fear silence for one reason. They think silence makes them look weak. They think if they don't explain, they'll be misunderstood. They think if they don't defend themselves, they'll be judged. They think if they don't speak up immediately, they'll lose their position. That belief keeps them powerless. Silence is not weakness. Silence is authority. Authority never rushes. Authority never panics. Authority never begs to be understood. Strong people don't rush to be understood. Read that again. Strong people don't rush to be understood. The weak explain. The insecure justify. The unsure overclarify. And every extra word chips away at their presence. You have a choice. You can keep explaining yourself to people who already decided how they see you, or you can let silence carry your weight. That's the key. Society trains you to talk. From childhood, you're rewarded for explaining your feelings, your intentions, your mistakes. You're told communication fixes everything. It doesn't. Unnecessary communication weakens authority. Look at real leaders. Real ones. They don't fill space with words. They don't argue their worth. They don't chase agreement. They speak when it matters. And when they do, people listen. Why? Because silence created tension. And tension creates attention. When you speak less, your words land heavier. When you stay quiet, people lean in. It's not about being quiet. It's about being deliberate. Let's talk about negotiations. The most powerful move in a negotiation is not the perfect argument. It's the pause after the offer. Most people can't handle it. They rush to sweeten the deal. They rush to explain why their offer is fair. They rush to talk themselves into a worse position. Silence holds the line. The person who stays calm and quiet controls the pace. The person who controls the pace controls the outcome. You don't need their permission to slow down. Now look at everyday life. Someone questions your decision. Your instinct is to explain why you did what you did, to justify, to defend. Stop. Ask yourself one thing. Do they actually deserve an explanation? Most of the time, they don't. Explanations invite debate. Silence ends it. That's not arrogance. That's boundaries. Silence forces people to adjust their behavior around you. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence requires it. That's the key. Boundaries don't need speeches. They need consistency. When you stop reacting and stop explaining, people feel it immediately. They may push at first. They may test you. That's normal. Hold your ground. Silence is pressure. Pressure reveals character. Now let's dismantle a dangerous lie. That silence equals submission. Submission is compliance without choice. Silence is choice. You have a choice. You choose when to speak. You choose when to engage. You choose when someone has access to your thoughts. That's authority. Think about calm people you respect. The ones who walk into a room and don't need to announce themselves. The ones who don't dominate conversations but somehow dominate the space. They're not louder. They're not aggressive. They're composed. Their silence says, I'm comfortable here. Their calm says, I don't need validation. Strong people don't rush to be understood. Now here's the discipline. Stop correcting every misunderstanding. This will be uncomfortable. Your ego will scream. Your mind will create stories about being misjudged. Let them think what they want. Your job is not to manage perceptions. Your job is to manage your behavior. It's not about image. It's about discipline. Another instruction. Stop announcing boundaries. You don't need to say, don't talk to me like that. You show it by disengaging. You show it by going quiet. You show it by not rewarding disrespect with attention. Attention is currency. Silence is withdrawal. People learn fast. You don't need their permission to step back. Here's a powerful rule. If you wouldn't ask someone for advice, don't explain yourself to them. That one rule will save you years of wasted energy. Authority grows when you stop volunteering information, when you stop narrating your decisions, when you stop defending your direction. Say less. Stand firm. That's the key. And don't confuse this with emotional shutdown. You're not numbing yourself. You're not suppressing truth. You're choosing timing. You're choosing when words serve you and when they don't. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence without noise. Now let's make this practical. In conversations, answer only what is asked. Not what you assume they want to know. Not what makes you feel safe. Short answers. Clear tone. No extra explanation. Watch what happens. People either respect it or reveal that they never did. Either way, you win. In conflict, let the other person finish. Don't interrupt. Don't rush to respond. Let silence stretch. That silence will say more than any argument ever could. Strong people don't rush to be understood. Say it until it sticks. Because once you stop chasing understanding, respect shows up on its own. You're learning that silence isn't retreat. It's positioning. You're not disappearing. You're solidifying. You reclaimed control over your reactions. Now you're learning how silence elevates your status. But authority is only one side of the equation. Next, we expose the habit that destroys respect faster than anything else. You stopped reacting. You stopped overspeaking. Now let's talk about the silent mistake that makes people look weak without realizing it. Chapter 3: The more you explain, the less you are respected. Most people don't realize when respect starts slipping away. It doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes sentence by sentence. Every unnecessary explanation weakens your position. Every justification lowers your authority. Every attempt to convince someone who already decided against you costs you status. Explanation is negotiation for approval. Say it again. Explanation is negotiation for approval. When you explain too much, you're not clarifying. You're asking to be accepted. And authority never asks. You have a choice. You can keep explaining yourself, hoping someone finally understands. Or you can stop talking and let your actions speak. That's the key. Let's be honest. Most explanations aren't given for clarity. They're given for comfort. You explain because you're uncomfortable with silence, uncomfortable with judgment, uncomfortable with the idea that someone might disagree with you. So you talk. You justify your decision. You defend your feelings. You argue your logic. And the other person senses it immediately. They hear uncertainty. They smell insecurity. They feel permission to push harder. It's not about communication. It's about discipline. Think about the last time you over-explained. You said just too many times. You added unnecessary details. You softened your stance to sound reasonable. Did it help? Or did it invite more questions, more resistance, more pressure? Over-explaining opens doors that should stay closed. Here's the harsh truth. People who want to understand you don't need long explanations. People who want to challenge you will use every explanation against you. That's the trap. Look at real-life scenarios. You make a decision at work. Someone questions it. Not to understand but to test you. If you launch into a long explanation, you signal doubt. A calm, brief response signals confidence. You don't need their permission to decide. Another example. You set a boundary. Someone pushes back. You start explaining why the boundary exists, where it comes from, how you feel about it. You just turned a boundary into a debate. Silence would have ended it. Explanation is negotiation for approval. And negotiation lowers your leverage when it isn't required. Now let's talk about emotions. This is where people lose the most respect. Someone hurts you, disrespects you, crosses a line. Your instinct is to explain how it made you feel, to justify why you're upset, to convince them your reaction is valid. Stop. Your feelings don't need validation from the person who caused them. You don't need their permission to feel what you feel. The more you explain your emotions, the more power you give away. It's not about sensitivity. It's about discipline. Strong people don't argue for emotional legitimacy. They state facts or they say nothing. That's the key. Now here's a rule that will change how people treat you. Never explain yourself to someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. Read that again. Some people don't want clarity. They want control. They want you defensive. They want you justifying. They want you talking. Silence shuts that down immediately. Let's make this practical. Instruction 1. Answer once. When someone questions you, respond clearly and briefly. Then stop. Do not add follow-up explanations unless directly asked. Do not preempt objections. Answer once. Then silence. Watch what happens. Most people will either accept it or reveal they were never asking in good faith. Either outcome is useful. Instruction 2. Remove filler language. Words like just, I think, maybe, I was trying to, weaken your presence. You're not asking for approval. You're stating your position. It's not about being harsh. It's about being precise. Instruction 3. Let silence end conversations. Not every conversation deserves a conclusion. Some deserve an exit. If a discussion keeps circling, repeating, Escalating, it's not a conversation anymore. It's a power struggle. Silence ends power struggles. You don't need to win verbally. You need to stop feeding it. That's the key. Now let's address the fear underneath over-explaining. The fear of being misunderstood. Here's reality. You will be misunderstood no matter what you do. Explaining more doesn't fix that. It just exhausts you. Your job is not to control perception. Your job is to control behavior. It's not about image. It's about discipline. Strong people accept misunderstanding as the cost of self-respect. They don't chase agreement. They don't chase validation. They don't chase closure. They move forward. You have a choice. You can keep explaining yourself into exhaustion, or you can stand still and let silence speak. That's authority. Now observe people you respect. They don't narrate their decisions. They don't justify their direction. They don't overshare their reasoning. They act. They pause. They let others adjust. Explanation is negotiation for approval. Once you internalize that, your behavior changes instantly. You stop talking to be liked. You stop explaining to be safe. You start choosing words strategically. And sometimes you choose none. Silence is not avoidance. It's filtration. It filters out people who demand access to you without earning it. That's the key. Now, a final discipline. When you feel the urge to explain, ask yourself one question. Am I speaking to clarify or to be accepted? If the answer is acceptance, stop talking. You don't need their permission. Every time you resist over-explaining, you reclaim a piece of your authority. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming solid. You've learned how reaction costs power. You've learned how silence creates authority. Now you've learned how explanations destroy respect. And we're not done. Because silence doesn't just protect you, it exposes others. You've stopped reacting. You've stopped explaining. Now let's talk about what happens when you say nothing and let people show you exactly who they are. Chapter 4: Let others reveal themselves while you stay quiet. Most people talk too much because they are afraid of silence. They think silence is empty. They think silence is awkward. They think silence is dangerous. They're wrong. Silence is a vacuum, and human nature hates a vacuum. When you say nothing, people rush to fill the space. They talk. They explain. They justify. They expose. Say nothing, learn everything. That's the rule. That's the discipline. You have a choice. You can rush to speak and give away information. Or you can stay quiet and let others reveal who they really are. That's the key. Most people believe power comes from saying the right thing at the right time. In reality, power often comes from not saying anything at all. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. And discomfort makes people careless. They talk too much. They contradict themselves. They show their motives. You stay still. They unravel. Say nothing, learn everything. Let's look at arguments. Two people are in conflict. One is emotional. The other is calm. The emotional one wants a reaction. They want resistance. They want engagement. If you give it to them, the argument escalates. If you don't, something interesting happens. They keep talking. They repeat themselves. They exaggerate. They start contradicting their earlier points. All you did was stay quiet. Silence didn't avoid the conflict. Silence controlled it. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. When you don't interrupt, people feel compelled to justify themselves. They start revealing what actually matters to them. Not what they claim matters, but what truly drives them. That's information. Information is leverage. That's the key. Now let's talk about manipulation. Manipulators rely on reactions. They provoke to see where your weak points are. They throw emotional hooks and wait for you to bite. Silence ruins their strategy. When you don't react, they don't know which button to press. When you don't respond immediately, They lose timing control. When you stay calm, they feel exposed. You don't need their permission to observe instead of engage. Say nothing, learn everything. Now consider professional settings. Meetings, negotiations, group discussions. The person who talks first usually reveals their position. The person who talks the most usually reveals their insecurity. Watch this closely. When you stay quiet, people start projecting. They assume your silence means disagreement, or approval, or authority, or judgment. They fill in the blanks themselves. You didn't say a word. That's power. Silence turns you into a mirror. And most people don't like what they see. That's why they keep talking. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being composed. Now let's correct a misunderstanding. Silence is not avoidance. Avoidance is running away from discomfort. Silence is staying present without reacting. Huge difference. You're not disengaging. You're observing. That's the key. Here's a discipline you must practice. When someone speaks emotionally, do not match their energy. Lower yours. Slow down your breathing. Relax your face. Let the silence stretch 1 second longer than feels comfortable. Most people crack. They start explaining themselves. They soften their stance. They expose doubt. You didn't force anything. You simply stayed quiet. Say nothing, learn everything. Another example. Someone accuses you of something unfair. Your instinct is to defend yourself immediately, to correct the narrative. Stop. Let them finish. Let the silence sit. Often, they'll keep talking and talk themselves into a weaker position. They add details. They exaggerate. They reveal assumptions. Now, when you finally speak, if you choose to, it's from a position of clarity. You have the full picture. You have a choice. Silence first. Response second. That order matters. It's not about winning. It's about seeing clearly. Now let's get practical. Instruction 1. Stop interrupting. Interrupting is a form of insecurity. It signals urgency and emotional involvement. Let people finish their thoughts even when they're wrong. Silence gives them rope. What they do with it is on them. Instruction 2. Use neutral body language. Silence works best when your body is calm. No eye rolling. No sighs. No defensive posture. Stillness amplifies silence. That's the key. Instruction 3. Don't rush to clarify misunderstandings. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Some need exposure. When people misunderstand you intentionally, silence forces them to commit to their version. That commitment reveals intent. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. Now here's a hard truth. Some people only respect you once they realize they can't read you easily. Silence removes predictability. Predictability removes power. When people don't know what you're thinking, they become cautious. They choose words more carefully. They reveal more. You gain leverage without effort. Say nothing, learn everything. This discipline requires restraint. Your ego will want to jump in, to correct, to prove, to defend. That urge is the test. It's not about intelligence. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Every time you resist the urge to speak, you strengthen your control. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to read. That's emotional dominance. Now let's address fear. Fear of looking weak. Fear of looking passive. Fear of losing control. Silence doesn't make you weak. It reveals who already is. And remember, strong people don't need to perform strength. They let others show weakness. You have a choice. You can fill silence with words, or you can let silence fill with truth. That's the key. As you practice this, you'll notice something powerful. People start talking more around you. They overshare. They explain themselves without being asked. Your silence becomes a signal of control, a signal of confidence, a signal of authority. And you did nothing. You've learned how silence creates authority. You've learned how over-explaining destroys respect. Now you've learned how silence exposes reality. But silence has another function. It doesn't just reveal others. It protects you under pressure. You stayed quiet. You observed. You gathered information. Now it's time to talk about the moments when silence matters most, when pressure is highest. Chapter 5: Emotional silence under pressure is a skill. Silence is easy when nothing is at stake. Anyone can stay calm when they're comfortable. That doesn't count. Silence only matters under pressure. Pressure is where silence pays the highest return. Say it again. Pressure is where silence pays the highest return. This chapter is not about theory. It's about execution. Because pressure is where most people collapse. Their emotions spike. Their instincts take over. Their mouth moves faster than their mind. And they lose. You have a choice. Under pressure, you can react automatically. Or you can respond deliberately. That gap between stimulus and response is not talent. It's a trained skill. And most people never train it. Let's be clear about something. Pressure is not accidental. It's applied. People create urgency to force mistakes. They use insults to trigger emotion. They use disrespect to pull you into chaos. Why? Because emotional people are predictable. Predictable people are controllable. That's the game. Pressure is where silence pays the highest return. Let's start with insults. Someone disrespects you, questions your competence, challenges your value. Your body reacts instantly. Heart rate up, jaw tight, thoughts racing. Your instinct says, respond now. Stop. That instinct is the trap. Reacting emotionally to disrespect gives the other person what they want: control over your state. It's not about pride. It's about discipline. Here's the first rule under pressure. Slow the body before you engage the mind. Breathe through your nose. Exhale longer than you inhale. Relax your shoulders. This is not weakness. This is control. That's the key. Now silence enters. Not passive silence. Intentional silence. You don't rush to defend. You don't rush to explain. You don't rush to escalate. You wait. Pressure exposes who owns themselves. Pressure is where silence pays the highest return. Now let's talk about urgency. Urgency is one of the most effective manipulation tools. Answer now. Decide quickly. This needs a response immediately. Most urgency is artificial. It's designed to bypass your judgment and force a reaction. You don't need their permission to slow down. Urgency benefits the person applying it, not you. Here's the discipline. When someone pushes urgency, you slow down by default. Even if you respond calmly. Even if you decide deliberately. Silence breaks urgency. That's the key. Now let's talk about emotional manipulation. Guilt, victimhood, passive aggression, provocation. These tactics only work if you react. When you stay silent, manipulators lose traction. They escalate. They reveal. They get sloppy. Say nothing. Observe everything. You have a choice. Engage emotionally and get dragged into their frame. Or stay composed and keep control of yours. It's not about coldness. It's about discipline. Now I'm going to give you a repeatable internal script. This is critical. Under pressure, your mind needs structure, not philosophy. Here's the script. Step 1. Label the moment. Internally say, "This is pressure." Naming it creates distance. Step 2. Delay response. Internally say, "I don't need to respond right now." You don't need their permission. Step 3. Regulate the body. Slow breath. Still posture. Relaxed face. Step 4. Ask one question. What response serves my position, not my emotion? That's the key. This script takes seconds, but it changes outcomes. Now let's apply this to real situations. In an argument, let the other person finish. Don't interrupt. Don't react. Silence after they finish is powerful. It forces them to sit with what they said. Most people can't handle that. They start talking again. They soften. They contradict. You didn't argue. You controlled the frame. In the workplace, when challenged aggressively, pause before responding. A calm, brief response after silence signals confidence. A rushed response signals insecurity. It's not about being right. It's about being steady. In social situations, when provoked, don't match energy. Lower it. Calm energy under pressure unsettles emotional people. They expected a reaction. They didn't get one. That's power. Pressure is where silence pays the highest return. Now let's address the mistake most people make. They think silence under pressure means suppression. It doesn't. Suppression is denying emotion. Discipline is managing it. You feel the emotion. You don't let it drive. That's emotional maturity. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Another mistake. Thinking silence means weakness. Weakness is losing control of yourself. Silence is self-mastery. You have a choice. You can let pressure decide your behavior, or you can decide it yourself. That choice defines your character. Now let's talk about practice. This skill is built in small moments. When someone cuts you off, pause. When someone criticizes, pause. When someone pressures, pause. 5 seconds. That pause is training. Over time, your nervous system learns that silence is safe. That calm is default. That pressure does not equal danger. And once that happens, something shifts. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to rush. People feel it. They may not know why, but they adjust. That's the key. Silence under pressure does not make life quieter. It makes you stronger. Now here's the final discipline for this chapter. When pressure hits, remember this sentence. I don't need to win this moment. I need to keep my control. Say it internally, because control compounds. Reactions don't. Pressure is temporary. Your reputation is permanent. You've learned how silence exposes others. Now you've learned how silence protects you when it matters most. You stayed calm under pressure. You slowed the moment. You kept your center. That's not accidental. That's trained. But calm alone isn't enough. Next, we take this skill deeper. Because true power comes when you detach emotionally and think clearly no matter what's happening around you. You've mastered silence under pressure. Now let's talk about mental dominance. Chapter 6. Detach emotionally. Dominate mentally. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think detachment means becoming cold. They think it means shutting down. They think it means not caring. They're wrong. Emotional detachment does not mean coldness. It means clarity. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. Say it again. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. When emotions run high, thinking becomes sloppy. Decisions become reactive. Words become weapons you later regret. Detachment is not suppression. Detachment is separation. You feel the emotion. You don't let it drive. That's the difference between chaos and control. You have a choice. You can let emotions sit in the driver's seat. Or you can move them to the passenger seat and take the wheel. That's the key. Let's be direct. Most mistakes people make are not because they lack intelligence. They're because they decided while emotional. Angry decisions. Fear-based decisions. Ego-driven decisions. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. This chapter teaches you how to think clearly when others can't. Let's start with chaos. Chaos is noise, raised voices, pressure, conflicting demands. Chaos wants your reaction. It feeds on urgency. Detachment starves it. When you detach emotionally, you step outside the storm. You don't deny it exists. You simply stop standing in the middle of it. You observe instead of absorb. That's mental dominance. Now let's apply this to real life. Negotiations. The person who wants the deal more loses leverage. Why? Because emotion leaks. They talk too much. They compromise too fast. They reveal urgency. The detached person waits. They don't rush. They don't explain. They don't fill silence. They let the other side reveal pressure. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. That silence is not emptiness. It's calculation. You don't need their permission to take your time. Now breakups. This is where emotional attachment destroys clarity. People beg. They plead. They explain. They chase closure. All emotion. No control. Detachment doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't let pain dictate behavior. You step back. You say less. You protect your dignity. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. It's not about heartbreak. It's about discipline. Now confrontations. Someone provokes you, disrespects you, challenges you publicly. Emotion wants to strike back immediately. Detachment pauses that impulse. You watch their tone, their body language, their intent. You decide strategically. That's the key. Emotion reacts. Detachment chooses. Now leadership. Real leaders don't mirror chaos. They absorb it and neutralize it. When others panic, leaders slow down. When others rush, leaders pause. When others react, leaders stay composed. Why? Because calm spreads, but panic spreads faster. Detachment is how you stop panic at the source. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. Now let's dismantle a dangerous myth. Detachment does not mean you don't care. It means you care enough not to sabotage yourself. You still feel anger. You still feel fear. You still feel disappointment. You just don't let those feelings speak for you. That's maturity. You have a choice. Act from emotion or act from clarity. One gives relief. The other gives results. That's the key. Now let's get practical. Here's the core discipline of emotional detachment. Separate feelings from decisions. Most people fuse them together. They feel angry, so they decide angrily. They feel afraid, so they decide defensively. You don't do that anymore. Here's how. Step 1. Acknowledge the emotion internally. I feel angry. I feel anxious. I feel hurt. Naming emotion creates distance. Step 2. Pause action. No messages. No speeches. No decisions. You don't need their permission to wait. Step 3. Ask one question. What decision would I make if I felt calm? That question cuts through emotion instantly. That's the key. You don't deny feelings. You delay decisions. That's discipline. Now another instruction. Stop narrating your emotions to others. Most people externalize feelings immediately. They vent. They explain. They seek validation. That keeps them trapped in emotion. Silence contains emotion. Containment leads to clarity. It's not about repression. It's about timing. Now here's where detachment becomes power. When you stop reacting emotionally, people can't predict you. They don't know if you're angry. They don't know if you're offended. They don't know if they succeeded in provoking you. That uncertainty shifts power. You're no longer easy to manipulate. That's mental dominance. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence clears it. Let's address fear again. Fear of appearing cold. Fear of appearing distant. Fear of losing connection. Those fears come from people who equate emotion with authenticity. Authenticity is not emotional leakage. Authenticity is alignment. You act in alignment with your values, not your impulses. That's the key. Now practice this in small moments. When annoyed, pause. When offended, pause. When tempted to send a long message, pause. Detachment is built rep by rep. Each pause trains your nervous system. Over time, calm becomes automatic. Clarity becomes default. And here's what happens next. You start seeing situations clearly while others are still emotional. You start making better decisions while others are still reacting. You start winning quietly. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't need their permission. Now a final truth for this chapter. Detachment does not make you less human. It makes you less controlled. Emotion is part of you. It is not the ruler of you. You feel it. You acknowledge it. Then you move beyond it. That's strength. You've learned how silence protects you under pressure. Now you've learned how detachment sharpens your mind. You're no longer trapped inside emotional storms. You're standing above them. But there's another reaction people have when they encounter silence and detachment. They get uncomfortable. And that discomfort works in your favor. You've detached emotionally. You've dominated mentally. Now let's talk about why silence unsettles people and why that discomfort gives you even more power. Chapter 7: Why Silence Makes People Uncomfortable and Powerful for You. Most people are terrified of silence. Not because silence is empty, but because silence forces confrontation. Not with you, with themselves. Your calm becomes their mirror. Say it again. Your calm becomes their mirror. When you stop talking, people start thinking. When you stop reacting, people start feeling. When you stay quiet, people are left alone with their own thoughts. And most people don't like what they find there. That discomfort is not your problem. It's your advantage. You have a choice. You can rush to fill silence and make others comfortable. Or you can stay still and let silence do the work. That's the key. Let's be very clear about something. Silence does not make situations awkward. People make situations awkward when they can't tolerate stillness. They fill space with words because words distract them from self-awareness. They talk because silence removes their mask. Your calm becomes their mirror. When you stay composed, people start projecting. They assume you're judging them. They assume you're unimpressed. They assume you're thinking something powerful. You didn't say anything. That's power. Now let's talk about awkward pauses. You've experienced this. A conversation stops. No one speaks. Most people panic internally. They rush to say something. Anything. A joke. An explanation. A filler sentence. Why? Because silence exposes insecurity. The person who fills silence is usually the one seeking approval. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. When you let silence stretch, something happens. The other person reveals their neediness, or their impatience, or their lack of confidence. You simply observed. That's the key. Now unanswered messages. This one triggers people deeply. You don't respond immediately. You don't react. You don't explain. The other person starts spiraling. They wonder what they did wrong. They reread their message. They imagine scenarios. You stayed silent. They lost composure. Your calm becomes their mirror. This is not about manipulation. It's about boundaries. You are not obligated to be constantly available. You are not obligated to respond on demand. You have a choice. Immediate response or deliberate response. Silence gives you leverage. Now let's talk about presence. Some people walk into a room and demand attention. Others walk in and receive it. The difference is not volume. The stillness. A quiet presence commands attention because it doesn't compete for it. When you're silent and grounded, people notice. They feel the contrast. They feel the weight. Your calm becomes their mirror. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. When you stop filling silence, some people will dislike you. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're arrogant. That's projection. They're uncomfortable because they can't control you with noise. It's not about likability. It's about discipline. Strong people choose respect over approval. That's the key. Now let's address the instinct to fill silence. This instinct comes from fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing connection. But connection built on constant reassurance is not connection. It's dependency. Silence reveals who needs constant validation and who doesn't. You don't need their permission to stop performing. Here's a discipline you must adopt. When silence appears, do nothing. Don't rush. Don't explain. Don't rescue the moment. Let it breathe. Count to 3 internally. Then 5. Then 10. Watch what happens. Most people will talk themselves into a weaker position. That's not cruelty. That's reality. Your calm becomes their mirror. Now let's talk about discomfort as a tool. Discomfort is not danger. It's information. When people feel uncomfortable around your silence, it means they can't read you. They can't predict you. They can't control the interaction. That uncertainty shifts power. You're no longer easy to manage. That's why silence feels threatening to insecure people. It exposes their need to dominate the conversation. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Another instruction. Stop explaining your silence. This is critical. If someone asks, "Why are you so quiet?" you don't owe them a justification. You can smile. You can say, "I'm listening," or you can say nothing at all. You don't need their permission. Explaining your silence defeats its purpose. That's the key. Now observe how people behave around you over time. Some will slow down. They'll choose words more carefully. They'll show respect. Others will push harder. They'll provoke. They'll demand reactions. Those are the people silence protects you from. Silence is a filter. It filters out those who need chaos to feel powerful. Your calm becomes their mirror. Now let's talk about leadership again. Leaders who tolerate silence allow better thinking. They don't rush decisions. They don't dominate conversations. They create space. That space invites honesty. It invites accountability. Silence doesn't kill communication. It improves it. Now here's the mistake to avoid. Do not weaponize silence emotionally. Silence is not punishment. Silence is not manipulation. Silence is not withdrawal. Silence is presence without noise. You stay engaged internally. You stay observant. You stay grounded. That's discipline. Now let's ground this with a final rule. If you feel the urge to speak just to reduce tension, don't. That urge is fear talking. Sit with it. You have a choice. Reduce discomfort temporarily, or build power long-term. That's the key. As you practice this, you'll notice something important. Silence stops feeling awkward. It starts feeling natural. You stop filling space. You stop chasing reactions. You stop managing other people's emotions. And people feel it. They adjust around you. You didn't demand respect. You didn't announce authority. You embodied it. You've learned how silence protects your power. You've learned how silence exposes others. Now you've learned how silence elevates your presence. But silence is not just internal. It shapes how you move in groups, how you speak in rooms, how you command attention without force. You stayed quiet. You let discomfort work for you. Now it's time to apply this skill outward into social dynamics, conversations, and environments where influence matters. You've mastered the internal game. Now let's talk about how silence controls the room. Chapter 8: Control the room without raising your voice. Most people think control comes from volume, from dominance, from being heard over others. They're wrong. Power does not shout. Power settles the room. The loudest voice is rarely the strongest. Say it again. The loudest voice is rarely the strongest. If you've been paying attention, you already know this. You've seen it in meetings, in debates, in group settings. The person who talks the most is rarely the one in charge. They're compensating. You have a choice. You can fight for attention, or you can command it without asking. That's the key. Let's break the illusion. Raising your voice does not increase authority. It exposes insecurity. Fast speech does not signal intelligence. It signals anxiety. Constant talking does not show leadership. It shows fear of silence. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Now let's talk about presence. Presence is not personality. Presence is control of pace. When you enter a room calmly, without urgency, without noise, people feel it immediately. You don't announce yourself. You don't rush to speak. You wait, and waiting shifts the dynamic. Others slow down. They adjust. They look to you. You didn't demand attention. You earned it through stillness. That's the key. Now look at meetings. Most meetings are dominated by people who speak early and often. They interrupt. They fill silence. They argue points before they're fully formed. And what happens? The room becomes noisy. Clarity disappears. Authority dissolves. Now watch the opposite. One person listens. They take notes. They don't rush to contribute. When they finally speak, it's brief. It's clear. It lands. Silence before and after their words gives those words weight. The room recalibrates. The loudest voice is rarely the strongest. You don't need their permission to speak last. Now debates. Debates are emotional traps. They tempt you to react, to interrupt, to prove. That's how you lose control. When you speak slower than everyone else, people listen harder. When you pause mid-sentence, people lean in. When you stop talking before the point feels finished, the point lingers. Silence amplifies meaning. That's the key. Now group settings. Social environments reward composure, not noise. The person who dominates conversations often gets tolerated, not respected. The quiet one who listens, observes, and speaks selectively becomes the anchor. Others gravitate toward stability. Your calm becomes the center of gravity. It's not about being introverted. It's not about being extroverted. It's about being deliberate. Now let's dismantle another lie. You don't control a room by talking more. You control a room by controlling yourself. Posture, breathing, eye contact, timing. These are silent signals of authority. You have a choice. Move with intention or move with impulse. That's the key. Let's get practical. Instruction 1. Slow your speech. Under pressure, people speed up. That makes them sound uncertain. When you slow down, you sound confident even if you're saying less. Speak one beat slower than feels natural. Let silence punctuate your sentences. The room will follow your pace. Instruction 2. Stop competing for airtime. If someone interrupts you, don't fight back. Stop speaking. Let them finish. Then wait. That silence reclaims control. When you resume, speak calmly or don't resume at all. You don't need their permission to disengage. Instruction 3. Reduce your word count. Say what matters. Cut the rest. Authority grows when people know you don't speak unnecessarily. It's not about cleverness. It's about discipline. Now let's talk about perception. People associate quiet confidence with competence. They associate loudness with insecurity. This is subconscious. You don't need to explain it. When you're calm and selective with words, people assume you're thinking deeply even when you're simply centered. That assumption works in your favor. The loudest voice is rarely the strongest. Now let's address fear. Fear of being ignored. Fear of being overlooked. Fear of losing relevance. Those fears push people to overspeak. Silence feels risky to the ego, but silence builds status. You have a choice: chase attention or attract respect. That's the key. Now here's an advanced discipline. Let others speak themselves tired. In group settings, people often talk past the point of value. Let them. Don't interrupt. Don't correct. When the noise settles, your brief contribution becomes the anchor. You didn't compete. You outlasted. Now let's talk about authority without aggression. True authority doesn't need force. It doesn't need intimidation. It doesn't need dominance displays. It needs consistency. When people know you won't react emotionally, won't raise your voice, won't rush, they adjust. They choose words more carefully. They show more respect. They seek your input. That's control. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Now another mistake to avoid. Do not confuse silence with absence. You are present. You are attentive. You are engaged. You simply don't broadcast everything. Presence without noise is intimidating to insecure people. That's not your responsibility. You don't need their permission to be composed. Now let's ground this. Next time you're in a meeting, speak last or not at all. Next time you're in a debate, slow your pace. Next time you're in a group, say less than expected. Watch what happens. People adjust around you. You didn't change them. You changed your discipline. The loudest voice is rarely the strongest. Say it until it sticks. Because once you stop trying to control rooms with noise, you start controlling them with presence. You've learned how silence protects you. You've learned how silence exposes others. You've learned how silence elevates you socially. But there's one more level. Silence is not just influence. It's protection. Protection from disrespect. Protection from chaos. Protection from people who test limits. You now know how to control the room without raising your voice. Next, we talk about how silence becomes an unbreakable boundary no one can cross. You controlled the room. Now let's talk about controlling access. Chapter 9: Silence as a boundary no one can cross. Most people think boundaries require explanations. They think boundaries require arguments. They think boundaries require force. They're wrong. Silence is the ultimate boundary. It requires no explanation. It requires no permission. It requires no negotiation. No reaction is a complete answer. Say it again. No reaction is a complete answer. Boundaries fail when you keep explaining them. Boundaries fail when you keep defending them. Boundaries fail when you keep engaging with people who already decided to disrespect you. Silence ends that cycle. You have a choice. You can keep arguing for respect, or you can withdraw access and let silence speak. That's the key. Let's talk about disrespect. Disrespect does not start loud. It starts subtle. Small jabs, dismissive tone, repeated testing. Most people respond emotionally. They react. They confront. They explain why the behavior is unacceptable. And what happens? The behavior continues. Because explanation invites debate. Debate invites escalation. Escalation drains your energy. Silence shuts the door. No reaction is a complete answer. When someone crosses a line and you go quiet, something powerful happens. They lose feedback. They lose leverage. They lose access. You didn't fight. You didn't beg. You didn't justify. You enforced the boundary without words. That's discipline. Now let's talk about toxic people. Toxic people thrive on engagement. Positive or negative, it doesn't matter. They provoke to feel powerful. They bait to get reactions. They push limits to see how much they can take. Silence starves them. When you stop reacting, they lose interest or escalate. Either way, the truth is revealed. Your calm becomes a filter. You don't need their permission to disengage. That's the key. Now, emotional baiting. Someone says something deliberately sharp. They want to hook you. They want emotion. If you react, they win. If you argue, they win. If you explain, they win. Silence denies the reward. No reaction is a complete answer. They may accuse you of being cold. They may accuse you of avoiding the issue. They may try harder. Hold steady. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is refusal. Refusal to play a rigged game. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Now, repeated boundary violations. This is where most people break. They explain once, then twice, then 10 times, and every explanation teaches the other person something dangerous. That your boundaries are flexible. Words create loopholes. Silence closes them. When a boundary is crossed repeatedly, silence is escalation without aggression. You don't threaten. You don't announce consequences. You apply them. You withdraw time. You withdraw attention. You withdraw access. That's the key. Now let's be very clear. Silence is not punishment. Silence is protection. You are protecting your peace, your energy, your self-respect. People who respect you don't need constant reminders. People who don't respect you don't deserve explanations. You have a choice. Keep explaining, or start enforcing. No reaction is a complete answer. Now let's talk about disengagement. Disengagement is not weakness. It's strategic exit. You disengage when engagement costs more than it gives. You disengage when patterns repeat. You disengage when respect is absent. You disengage when silence teaches faster than words. That's maturity. Now here's a critical instruction. Stop announcing disengagement. You don't need to say, "I'm done with this conversation." You don't need to say, "I'm setting a boundary." You simply stop responding. Silence does the work. You don't need their permission. Announcing boundaries invites argument. Silence ends it. That's the key. Now let's address fear. Fear of being seen as rude. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing relationships. Healthy relationships survive silence. Unhealthy ones expose themselves through it. If silence ends a relationship, the relationship was built on access, not respect. That's not loss. That's clarity. It's not about loneliness. It's about discipline. Now let's apply this practically. Someone sends a disrespectful message. You don't reply. Someone repeats the same manipulative behavior. You don't engage. Someone crosses the same boundary again. You withdraw access. No explanation. No justification. No reaction. No reaction is a complete answer. Now watch carefully what happens next. Some people apologize. Some people adjust. Some people disappear. All outcomes are acceptable. Because silence sorted it for you. That's the key. Now let's talk about permanence. Some doors should not be reopened. When silence closes a door, keep it closed. Re-engaging after disrespect teaches people that consequences are temporary. Discipline means consistency. You don't reopen doors because of guilt. You don't reopen doors because of pressure. You don't reopen doors because of nostalgia. You have a choice. Protect your standard, or lower it. That choice defines your future. Now here's the hardest part. Silence will test you. Your ego will want closure. Your emotions will want resolution. Your habits will want engagement. Hold steady. No reaction is a complete answer. Say it until it becomes instinct. Because once you internalize this, your life changes. You stop arguing with disrespect. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop explaining boundaries. You enforce them quietly. That's power. You've learned how silence protects your power. You've learned how silence controls rooms. Now you've learned how silence guards your life. But this is not the end. Silence is not just a tactic. It's an identity, a way of moving through the world with discipline, calm, and self-respect. You've built the skill. You've enforced the boundary. Now it's time to integrate everything into who you are, permanently. You protected your boundaries. You reclaimed your space. Now let's talk about what happens when emotional silence becomes your default state. Chapter 10: Become untouchable through emotional discipline. Most people use silence as a tactic. They deploy it when convenient. They abandon it when emotions rise. That's why it never works long-term. Emotional silence is not a tactic. It's a lifestyle. Calm is your default state. Say it again. Calm is your default state. This chapter is not about doing something once. It's about becoming someone permanently. Because power that turns on and off is not power. It's performance. You are here to build something deeper. You have a choice. You can return to old habits under stress. Or you can lock in discipline as your identity. That's the key. Let's be clear. If silence only appears when things are easy, it's useless. The calm disappears when pressure arrives. It's fake. Emotional discipline means you are the same person. In chaos, in conflict, in silence. That consistency is what makes you untouchable. Calm is your default state. Now let's talk about identity. People don't respect what you do occasionally. They respect what you embody consistently. Anyone can stay calm once. Few people stay calm always. Those few stand out immediately. They don't react. They don't chase. They don't explain. They move slower. They speak less. They decide deliberately. And the world adjusts to them. That's not luck. That's discipline. It's not about talent. It's not about intelligence. It's about emotional control. Now let's talk about long-term confidence. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't need validation. Why? Because it's internal. When you stop reacting emotionally, confidence stops depending on outcomes. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need approval. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You trust yourself. That's the key. Emotional independence is the result. You no longer need people to behave a certain way for you to feel stable. You no longer need situations to go your way for you to feel calm. You carry your center with you. Calm is your default state. Now let's talk about how people treat you. People treat you the way your behavior trains them to. If you react, they push. If you explain, they question. If you engage emotionally, they escalate. But when you stay calm consistently, something shifts. People stop testing you. They stop provoking you. They stop wasting your time. Not because you told them to, because your behavior made it pointless. You don't need their permission. Silence trains others faster than words ever could. That's the key. Now let's integrate the entire book. You learn to pause instead of react. You learn to stop over-explaining. You learn to let others reveal themselves. You learn to stay calm under pressure. You learn to detach emotionally. You learn to let discomfort work for you. You learn to control rooms without noise. You learn to enforce boundaries without words. None of that matters unless it becomes automatic. Discipline is repetition under stress. It's not about flaw. It's about discipline. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. You will be tested. People will push harder once they feel the shift. They will try old tactics. They will escalate. This is where most people break. They think, I've been calm long enough. They revert. They react. and the old dynamic returns. Don't do that. Consistency is everything. Calm is your default state. That means you pause even when insulted. You slow down even when rushed. You stay quiet even when misunderstood. You disengage even when tempted to explain. You have a choice: short-term relief or long-term power. That's the key. Now let's talk about self-respect. Self-respect is not how loudly you defend yourself. It's how little nonsense you tolerate. When emotional discipline becomes your identity, you stop negotiating your worth. You don't argue with disrespect. You don't chase closure. You don't explain boundaries. You enforce them quietly. That's internal authority. Authority that doesn't need approval. You don't need their permission. Now let's address loneliness. Some people fear silence because they fear being alone. Here's the truth. Emotional discipline will reduce your circle, but it will increase its quality. People who relied on your reactions will fade. People who respected your calm will stay. That's not loss. That's alignment. It's not about isolation. It's about standards. Now let's talk about the mirror. When you become calm by default, you start seeing yourself differently. You trust your reactions or lack of them. You stop second-guessing. You stop replaying conversations. Your mind gets quieter. That quiet is clarity. That clarity compounds. Calm is your default state. Now here's the final discipline. Stop identifying with your emotions. You feel anger, but you are not anger. You feel fear, but you are not fear. You feel frustration, but you are not frustration. You are the one who observes. That separation is mastery. Emotion informs. Discipline decides. That's the key. Now apply this daily. Morning, start slow. Conversations, speak less than necessary. Conflict, pause before responding. Pressure, slow the body. Disrespect, withdraw access. Silence, let it work. Repeat. This is not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's effective. And over time, something irreversible happens. People stop seeing you as reactive. They stop seeing you as emotional. They stop seeing you as available for manipulation. They see you as solid, untouchable. Calm is your default state. Now understand this. You didn't become cold. You became centered. You didn't lose emotion. You gained control. You didn't disappear. You sharpened your presence. That is emotional discipline. And once it's internalized, it cannot be taken from you. This audiobook was never about silence alone. It was about power. Real power. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't explain. The kind that doesn't react. You have a choice. Return to old patterns. Or live from this discipline permanently. Choose discipline. Because once calm becomes who you are, nothing and no one can move you. You mastered emotional silence. Now you live it. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to react to feel powerful. Silence has already given you everything: clarity, control, authority. When others panic, you stay calm. When others explain, you stay grounded. When others react, you remain still. That is emotional dominance. That is inner power. From this moment forward, your challenge is simple. Pause before reacting. Say less than necessary. Let silence do the work. Practice it today. Practice it under pressure. And watch how the world responds differently to you without you saying a word.